This bonus will save me. I whispered. It vanished in one night, along with my marriage. My name is Jacob. I deal cards for a living. I used to come home to a wife who smiled when I walked through the door. Now I sign papers that end everything we built together. People think dealers can't lose. We see the math. We know the odds. But knowing how fire works doesn't keep you from burning. It started with an eviction notice and 72 hours to find $3,000. I'd watched thousands of players lose at my table, convinced I was different because I understood the game. That night, I sat on the other side of the felt with our rent money, certain my 4 years of inside knowledge would finally pay off. For an hour, I was right. My stack grew to 8,000. I could taste saving our house, our marriage, our future. Then the cards turned cold. When the dealer becomes the desperate player, and your wife finds divorce papers while you're losing everything she trusted you with. How do you explain that the person who should have known better didn't? The envelope was folded in half, stuffed into our mailbox like someone's afterthought. I pulled it out with my coffee cup in one hand, still wearing yesterday's dealer uniform. The white paper had that official weight to it, the kind that makes your stomach drop before you even read the words. Notice of eviction. Tenant has 3 days to remit payment of $3,200 or vacate premises. I stood there in our driveway, staring at the paper while Mrs. Patterson next door watered her roses. Tuesday morning, October 15th. Sarah was already at the hospital pulling another 12-hour shift. The house felt different when she wasn't home. Bigger somehow, emptier. Inside, our kitchen table looked like a crime scene. Bills scattered everywhere. Credit card statements showing balances that made my hands shake. Sarah's student loan notices stacked in one corner. The mortgage company's letters getting more urgent each month. I'd been shoving them into drawers, telling myself we'd figure it out next week, next paycheck. Somehow. I counted what we had. My wallet held $127 in tips from last night's shift. Our checking account, according to the app on my phone, showed $213. Savings account, $1,200, but that was supposed to be for emergencies. I guess this qualified. The eviction notice said 3 days. My next paycheck wasn't due until Friday, $8.90 after taxes. Even if I worked every extra shift Danny would give me, we'd still be short. I walked to the refrigerator, looking for something to eat. Our wedding photo was stuck to the door with a magnet from Branson, Sarah and me grinning like idiots in front of Silver Dollar City. That was 2018. We'd signed the mortgage papers 3 years later, sitting in the bank's conference room with hands clasped under the table. The loan officer had smiled when he shook our hands. Congratulations on your new home. Now I was staring at an eviction notice while wearing a casino dealer's uniform. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent 8 hours a night watching people lose money they couldn't afford to lose. I dealt cards to folks betting their rent money, their grocery money, their kids' college funds. Always wondered how they got to that point. How someone makes the decision to risk everything on cards or dice or spinning wheels. Sarah's scrubs hung on the hook by the back door. Navy blue with little stethoscope patterns. She'd picked up an extra shift last night, working until 2 a.m. while I dealt blackjack to tourists and regulars. We were both scrambling, both working ourselves raw, but the bills kept coming faster than our paychecks. I tried to remember the last time we'd had a real conversation. Not about money or work or which bills were due when. Just talking like we used to. Maybe 3 weeks ago? Maybe longer. The house felt too quiet. No coffee maker gurgling. No morning news on the TV. Just me and this paper that could end everything we'd built together. I folded the eviction notice and stuck it in my back pocket. Sarah would ask about the mail when she called during her break. I'd have to tell her something. The truth would break her heart. Another lie would break mine. My phone buzzed against the counter. Hey, babe. Sarah's voice sounded tired even through the phone speaker. I could hear the hospital in the background, monitors beeping, someone calling for a doctor on the PA system. Hey. I leaned against our kitchen counter, staring at the stack of bills. How's your shift going? Long. Mrs. Rodriguez in room 12 keeps pulling out her 3rd time tonight. She sighed, and I pictured her rubbing her forehead the way she did when she was exhausted. Did you get the mail? The eviction notice felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. Just the usual stuff. Bills. Nothing important. I closed my eyes. Nothing we can't handle. The lie sat between us like a brick wall. We used to tell each other everything. When Sarah got her nursing degree, I was the first person she called. When I got laid off from the tire plant, she held me while I cried in our bedroom. Now we couldn't even talk about the mail without dancing around the truth. I'm picking up another double tomorrow, she said. Peterson called in sick again. That's 3 doubles this week. We need the money, Jacob. Her voice carried an edge I'd been hearing more often lately. Unless you've got another solution. I didn't. That was the problem. I'd been dealing cards at Riverside Casino for 4 years, watching other people's money disappear into the house's pockets. My paycheck barely covered groceries, let alone everything else we owed. Jacob? You still there? Yeah, sorry. Just tired. When did you get home? About an hour ago. I looked at the clock on the microwave. 8:30 a.m. I'd been dealing until 6, then sat in the casino parking lot for 20 minutes, adding up numbers that didn't add up. Danny asked if I wanted to work a double tonight. You should take it. The way she said it, matter of fact, like there wasn't any choice, made my chest tight. When did we become people who needed every extra dollar just to stay afloat? Sarah, are we okay? The question hung in the air for too long. Hospital sounds filled the silence. A cart rolled past wherever she was sitting. Someone laughed in the distance. I have to get back, she said finally. Mrs. Rodriguez probably has her 4 out again. I love you. Love you too. Get some sleep. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, wondering when I love you had started sounding like something we were supposed to say instead of something we meant. The eviction notice crackled when I pulled it out of my pocket. 3 days to come up with $3,200. Sarah was working herself to death, trying to keep us afloat. And I was lying to her about how bad things really were. I thought about calling her back, telling her the truth. But she was already carrying so much. Another problem might break her completely. Instead, I folded the notice and stuck it back in my pocket. Maybe I could figure something out before she got home. Maybe I could fix this without her ever knowing how close we'd come to losing everything. My phone sat silent on the counter. No messages, no solutions. No miracles. Just me and the truth I couldn't tell. The employee parking lot at Riverside Casino looked the same as always. 24 cars scattered across cracked asphalt. A few pickup trucks, Danny's motorcycle parked under the security light. I pulled into my usual spot and sat for a minute, staring at the employee entrance point 4 years ago. This job was supposed to be temporary. Get laid off from the tire plant, file for unemployment, find something to pay the bills while I looked for real work. The casino was hiring, no experience necessary. And dealing cards seemed easier than stocking shelves or flipping burgers. 4 years later. I was still here. The locker room smelled like industrial air freshener and desperation. I changed out of my jeans and t-shirt, pulled on the white dress shirt and black vest that marked me as casino property. Around me, other dealers did the same routine. Tommy from table 5 complaining about his back. Lisa from the poker room talking about her kids' soccer practice. You look like hell. Winslow, Danny Martinez said, slapping my shoulder. He was already dressed, his supervisor badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Thanks. You always know what to say. Late night. Something like that. I tied my black tie, checked my appearance in the small mirror taped to my locker door. White shirt, black vest, black tie, black pants. We all looked like undertakers. Table 7 today, Danny said. Mrs. Chin's already asking for you. Mrs. Chun, sweet lady, maybe 65, who came in every Tuesday with exactly $80 and left with exactly nothing. She'd been doing it for 6 months, ever since her husband died. I tried to warn her once, gently, about the odds. She'd smiled and patted my hand like I was her grandson. People need their routines, she'd said. The casino floor at 2 p.m. was different from the night crowd. Retirees mostly, people with time to kill and social security checks to blow. The lights seemed brighter during the day, the carpet patterns more obvious. At night, everything had a dreamlike quality. During the day, you could see the stains. I took my position behind table 7, straightened my cards, adjusted my chip rack. The routine was automatic after 4 years. Check the deck, count the bank, wait for players. Mrs. Chin appeared like clockwork, shuffling across the casino floor in her good shoes and cardigan. She always dressed up to lose her money, like it was a special occasion. Jacob, she smiled and sat in her usual spot. How are you today? I'm good, Mrs. Chun. How about you? Oh, getting by. She pulled out 4 $20 bills, crisp from the bank. I have a feeling about today. She always had a feeling. In 6 months, Her feelings had cost her roughly $2,000. But who was I to judge? I spent my nights facilitating other people's bad decisions while my own life fell apart. What can I get you? I asked, even though I knew the answer. 20 to start. We'll see how it goes. I pushed a green chip across the felt. Mrs. Chin picked it up, rubbed it between her fingers like a rabbit's foot, and placed it in the betting circle. The cards fell the way they always did. Random, indifferent, mathematical. Mrs. Chun lost the first hand, then the second. On the third hand, she caught a blackjack and clapped like she'd won the lottery. See, I told you I had a feeling. But feelings don't beat mathematics. After an hour, Mrs. Chin's $80 was gone. She kissed my cheek, something she did every week, and shuffled back toward the exit that I watched her go. This sweet lady who turned her grief into gambling, her loneliness into losses. Then I looked around the casino floor. Dozens of tables, hundreds of machines, thousands of people convinced they could beat odds designed to break them. The house edge on blackjack was small, maybe 0.5% if you played perfect strategy. But small edges add up. Give the casino enough time, enough hands, enough players, and the mathematics became inevitable. I dealt maybe 300,000 hands in 4 years. Watched millions of dollars disappear into the casino's accounts. Seen college funds evaporate, retirement savings vanish, marriage proposals turn into divorce papers. And here I was, still dealing cards while my own life crumbled. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text message. Mrs. Chen wasn't the only regular losing money at my table. By 4 p.m., I'd dealt to the usual crowd, retirees burning through pension checks, office workers on long lunches, tourists convinced Vegas rules applied in Missouri. A young couple from Milwaukee sat down, holding hands and grinning. Anniversary trip, they said. 2 years married. The woman wore a dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Her husband pulled out $600 bills like it was nothing. We're feeling lucky today, he announced. That I'd heard those words thousands of times. They never meant what people thought they meant. The mathematics played out exactly as designed. The couple started with 600, built it up to 850, then watched it disappear in 20 minutes. Basic strategy errors. Emotional betting. The husband doubled down on 12 against a dealer 10, a move so bad it made my teeth ache. When their money was gone, they stopped holding hands. That was supposed to be for dinner, the woman said quietly. It's fine, her husband replied, but his voice had an edge. We'll find somewhere cheap. They left without looking at each other. Another small tragedy, another marriage stressed by a few minutes of poor decisions. I'd seen it happen hundreds of times. Good people, bad choices, predictable results. By 6 p.m., my table had processed maybe $12,000. The casino kept roughly 600 of it, a 5% hold that would make any bank jealous. I'd facilitated it all, dealing cards with professional neutrality while watching hope transform into disappointment. Tommy from table 5 wandered over during a lull. You look distracted today. Just tired. Sarah working nights again. I nodded. Tommy had been dealing for 8 years. He understood the strain of casino schedules, the way relationships bent under the weight of odd hours and financial pressure. Marriage is hard enough without this job, he said. The hours, the money flowing everywhere except into our pockets. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Can you cover groceries this week? My check's going to rent. I stared at the message, calculating. We needed $3,200 for the eviction notice. Sarah thought we needed $1,200 for regular rent. The gap between what she knew and what I knew felt insurmountable. Break time? I told Tommy. The employee break room smelled like microwaved food and desperation. I bought a Coke from the vending machine and checked my phone. 3 missed calls from First National Mortgage. My stomach dropped. The voicemail was automated, professional. Final. This message is for Jacob Winslow regarding account number 477291. Your mortgage payment is 63 days past due. Foreclosure proceedings will begin if your account is not brought current within 72 hours. Please contact our office immediately. 72 hours. The same deadline as the eviction notice. They were coordinating our destruction. I played the message again, as if hearing it twice might change the words. Around me, other dealers ate dinner and complained about difficult players. Lisa from poker was talking about her son's piano lessons. Tommy was showing pictures of his new granddaughter. Normal people with normal problems. Not people hiding foreclosure notices from their wives. I counted the money in my wallet. $143 in tips from today's shift, plus the 20 I'd started with. Not even enough for groceries, let alone $3,200. My phone rang. Sarah calling from the hospital. Hey, I answered, trying to sound normal. Did you get my text about groceries? Yeah, I can cover it. Another lie. I was getting good at them. Thank you. I'm sorry things are so tight right now. It's not your fault. That much was true. This was all me. My job that didn't pay enough, my inability to find something better, my failure to protect us from this situation. I love you, she said. Love you too. After she hung up, I sat in the break room calculating impossible math. My next paycheck, $890. Sarah's, maybe $1,100 after her extra shifts. Even if we stopped eating, stopped buying gas, stopped existing, we'd still be $2,000 short. The vending machine hummed next to me, full of snacks that cost more than some people's hourly wages. The casino made more in an hour than I made in a month. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Danny Martinez walked into the break room, saw me staring at my phone. Everything okay, Winslow? Fine. Just checking messages. Your shift ends at 10 tonight, right? Johnson called in sick. I could use someone for the overnight if you're interested. Extra hours meant extra money. $16 an hour plus tips. Maybe another $150 total. A drop in the ocean, but still better than nothing. I'll take it. Did you get the money for rent? Sarah's text arrived at 8:47 p.m., right in the middle of dealing to a businessman from Chicago who was convinced he had a system. The man had been at my table for an hour, methodically losing $2,000 while explaining his strategy. I stared at my phone screen, Sarah's question burning like acid. She was asking because she'd already done everything she could, picked up extra shifts, borrowed from her sister, probably pawned something else. She was asking because she trusted me to handle the big problems while she handled everything else. I typed, working on it. Deleted it, typed. Almost there. Deleted that too. The businessman doubled down on 11 against my face card, drew a 4 for 15, then watched me flip over a 6 for 17. His system wasn't working. Systems never worked. The house edge was mathematical certainty, not something you could outsmart with patterns or intuition. That's impossible, he muttered, stacking his remaining chips. The cards should have turned by now. Should have, would have, could have. The casino was built on those phrases. I finally typed back, working on it. Love you. The businessman lost his last chips 10 minutes later. He sat there for a moment, staring at the empty betting circle like it might magically refill. How long have you been dealing? He asked. For years. You ever play? I mean, off the clock. The question hung in the air. In 4 years, a dozen players had asked me the same thing. The answer was always no. Dealers who gambled were like doctors who smoked. It didn't end well. Never, I said. But that wasn't entirely true anymore. I was thinking about it. For the first time in 4 years, I was calculating odds not as a dealer, but as a potential player. The businessman left, muttering about rigged games and bad luck. Danny Martinez appeared at my shoulder. How's it going tonight? Quiet. That guy from Chicago dropped $2,000. They always do. You ready for your break? I nodded, following Danny toward the employee area. Behind us, the casino floor hummed with activity. Machines dinging, chips clicking, players chasing losses with more losses. Winslow, Danny said as we reached the break room. You know the employee policy on playing, right? The question seemed random. What about it? Off-duty dealers can play at other tables, as long as you're not in uniform and not on shift. Some new guy was asking about it earlier. The information hit me like a physical blow. In 4 years, I'd never thought about that policy. Never needed to. Just curious, Danny added. The kid seemed nervous about it. My shift ended at midnight. The morning crowd didn't arrive until 10 a.m. 10 hours of minimal supervision, skeleton crew, reduced surveillance. Sarah's text still glowed on my phone screen. The casino transformed after midnight. Day players went home to families and responsibilities. Night players arrived with different energy, darker, more desperate, willing to risk money they shouldn't risk. I took over table 7 from evening dealer, counted the bank, shuffled the cards. The overnight crowd was smaller but more intense. Professional gamblers, insomniacs, people running from problems they couldn't face in daylight. My first player was a woman in scrubs. Nurse, probably just off shift like Sarah. She sat down with $300 and ordered coffee. Long night. I asked. 16 hours in the ER. Some kid came in with a gunshot wound. We couldn't save him. She rubbed her eyes. I just need to not think for a while. I understood that feeling. The need to escape, to focus on something that wasn't real life. Cards provided that escape. Simple decisions, clear outcomes, mathematical certainty in an uncertain world. She lost the 340 minutes. Walked away without saying goodbye. The next player was a retired electrician I'd seen before. Tuesday nights were his routine. Arrive at 1 a.m., lose between 8 and 1200, leave at dawn. He'd been doing it for 3 years. How's the family, Tommy? I asked as he sat down. Granddaughter's birthday next week. She's turning 7. He placed 5 green chips in the betting circle. Gonna buy her one of those electric scooters. Tommy lost $850 over the next 2 hours. The scooter money, plus whatever else he'd scraped together. He applied for a casino marker to keep playing, credit extended by the house to facilitate more losing. I processed his application while calculating the mathematics of his situation. 3 years of Tuesday nights. Roughly $1,000 per week. That was over $150,000 gone into the casino's accounts. The house edge was patient. It didn't need to win every hand, just enough hands over enough time. Give it 3 years and a reliable customer, and the mathematics became inevitable. Tommy's marker was approved. He signed for another 500, lost it in 30 minutes, then stumbled toward the exit as dawn broke outside. See you next week. Jacob, he called over his shoulder. Around me, the casino floor was emptying. Night shift employees looked tired, ready for morning crews to take over. In 6 hours, my shift would end. In 6 hours and 15 minutes, I could walk back inside as a customer instead of an employee. My phone buzzed. Text from Sarah, just got home. Miss you. See you tomorrow night. Tomorrow night. She had no idea what tomorrow might bring. During my 4 a.m. break, I walked past the casino's ATM bank in the main lobby. 5 machines lined up like slot machines, each charging $5 per transaction. I'd watched thousands of players feed money into these machines, paying fees to access their own cash, the desperate march to the ATM. It happened every night. Player runs out of chips, walks to the lobby, withdraws more money, returns to lose it faster than the first batch. The casino made money on the fees, then made money when that cash hit the tables. Tonight, I was calculating differently. My checking account had $847. My savings had $1,200. My credit cards offered cash advances totaling another $1,800, $3,847 total. More than enough to cover the rent and eviction fees. Enough to save our house, our marriage, our future, but only if I could turn it into more money instead of losing it. I'd never thought about bankroll before. For 4 years, I'd watched other people's money disappear while keeping careful distance from the action. Tonight, standing in front of these machines, I was thinking like a player for the first time. The mathematics were clear. Blackjack had the lowest house edge in the casino, about 0.5% with perfect strategy. I knew perfect strategy. I'd been watching people play it wrong for 4 years, dealing cards to players who doubled down on hard 17 or split 10s because they had a feeling. I wasn't those players. I knew when to hit, when to stand, when to double down. I understood the composition of the deck, could track high cards and low cards through the shoe. I had 4 years of professional experience. The rationalization felt solid. I wasn't some tourist convinced he could beat the system. I was the system. I understood exactly how it worked. My phone buzzed. Text from Danny. Can you stay until 6? Morning dealer called in sick. Double shift meant extra money. $32 in wages plus maybe $60 in tips. $92 total against a $3,200 problem. Mathematical insignificance. I typed back, yes. But my mind was already calculating something else. The window between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. Skeleton crew. Minimal supervision. The brief period when surveillance was lightest and pit bosses took their longest breaks. 4 hours when a dealer could become a player without much notice. I walked back to table 7, where an oil worker was celebrating a small win by buying drinks for strangers. He'd hit blackjack 3 times in a row and was convinced the universe owed him continued luck. He was wrong about the universe, but right to celebrate. In 30 minutes, he'd lost everything back plus 200 more. Danny's text had come at exactly the right moment. or exactly the wrong moment, depending on how you looked at it. Staying until 6 a.m. meant more time to think, more time to watch the patterns, more time to convince myself that 4 years of dealing cards had taught me something the house didn't want me to know. The oil worker finally stumbled away from my table at 5:30, drunk and broke, but still laughing. He'd lost $4,800 in 3 hours, money that had probably taken him weeks to earn in North Dakota or Texas, gone in the time it takes to watch a movie. Lucky night for the house, I said to Kevin Walsh, who was dealing table 12. They all are. Eventually, Kevin had been dealing for 6 years. He understood the mathematics better than anyone. You ever wonder what it's like on the other side? The question felt loaded. What do you mean? Being the player instead of the dealer. Having skin in the game. I'd never heard Kevin talk like this before. You thinking about it? Sometimes, when I see guys like that oil worker winning big before they lose bigger. For a few minutes, they're kings of the world. Kevin shuffled his cards with practiced efficiency. Then they crash back to earth. The house always wins. Always. But not every hand. Not every night. He dealt practice hands to an empty table, flipping cards with mechanical precision. Sometimes I think about finding that sweet spot. Win enough to matter. Quit before the mathematics catch up. That's what they all think. Yeah, but they don't know what we know. They don't see the patterns. Kevin's words echoed my own thoughts. We weren't like other players. We understood the game from the inside. We saw mistakes that cost players thousands, recognized opportunities that went unnoticed. That my shift ended at 6 a.m. sharp. I counted out my tokes, $63 in tips, and walked toward the employee exit. Behind me, the casino floor was nearly empty. A few diehard night players, some insomniacs. Skeleton crew of dealers and pit bosses. I in the parking lot. Dawn was breaking over the Missouri River. The sky looked like old money, gray and green and faded gold. I sat in my Honda Civic, keys in my hand, engine off. Sarah would be asleep. She'd worked until 2 a.m., probably fell into bed exhausted. She wouldn't expect me home until afternoon. Wouldn't call to check in until evening. Time to make a decision that I could drive home. Tell Sarah about the eviction notice. Admit that I'd been hiding our true situation. We could call bankruptcy lawyers, marriage counselors, family members who might help. We could face this together, honestly. Or I could walk back inside with the money that was supposed to save us. Sit down at a table where I'd never sat before. And prove that 4 years of watching other people lose had taught me how to win. The dealer uniform hanging in my back seat looked like a costume now. Something I could put on or take off depending on which side of the table I wanted to be on. I changed clothes in my car. Back inside at 6:23 a.m., I barely recognized the place. The casino floor felt different from this angle. Smaller somehow, more intimate. The same lights, same sounds, same carpet patterns, but everything looked foreign when you weren't wearing a uniform. I chose table 12, where Kevin Walsh was dealing to an empty game. He raised an eyebrow when I sat down, but said nothing. Dealers playing wasn't common, but it wasn't forbidden. Morning, Jacob. Rough night. Something like that. I pulled out 10 hundreds from my wallet. Change, please. Kevin exchanged my cash for chips with the same professional neutrality I'd used thousands of times. Green $25 chips, red 5s, white 1s. The colors looked different when they belonged to me. What's your pleasure? Blackjack. I placed a $100 chip in the betting circle. Kevin dealt the cards. Queen of hearts, ace of spades. Natural blackjack on my first hand. The payout was automatic. $150 pushed across the felt. Winner, Kevin said with a slight smile. The feeling was electric. Completely different from dealing thousands of hands to other people. This was my money, my decision, my win. The mathematics suddenly felt personal, immediate, alive. I doubled my bet to 200. Kevin dealt again. King of diamonds. 10 of clubs. 20. He showed a 6, flipped his whole card for 13. Drew an 8 for 21. Push for the next hour. I experienced something I'd never felt as a dealer, the real weight of each decision. Hit or stand, double down or surrender, split or stay. Every choice mattered because every chip was mine. My stack grew steadily. 2,000 became 2,500, then 3,000, then 4,800. I was playing perfect basic strategy, catching the shoe at exactly the right composition, feeling the mathematics work in my favor for once. Other players began to notice. A businessman from Denver started following my betting patterns. An elderly woman asked if I had any tips for beginners. Just play the math, I told her. At 7:40 a.m., my stack reached $8,100. More than twice what I needed for rent and fees. More than enough to save our house, our marriage, our future. For the first time in months, I could imagine walking through our front door with solutions instead of problems. I could see Sarah's face when I handed her the money. Watch her relief replace the worry she'd been carrying. Kevin shuffled up for a new shoe. Good run, he said. The fresh cards felt different in my hands. Heavier somehow, less cooperative. The new shoe would either continue my luck or end it that I had enough to quit. I had enough to save everything. But the mathematics that had been working for me all morning felt like they had more to give. At 7:45 a.m., a woman in a McDonald's uniform sat down at first base. She looked like she'd just finished a night shift. Tired eyes, grease-stained shirt. That particular exhaustion that comes from working jobs that don't pay enough. Is this table lucky? She asked Kevin, pulling out a stack of 20s. I mean, this gentleman's been winning all morning. Linda, her name tag read. She counted out $380 in carefully folded bills. Rent money, probably. Or grocery money. Maybe both. Every hand is independent, Kevin said automatically. Past results don't affect future outcomes. But Linda wasn't looking at Kevin. She was looking at me. At my stack of chips that had grown from 1,000 to over 8,000 in 90 minutes. What do you think? She asked me directly. You seem to know what you're doing. For 4 years, I'd given the company line to questions like this. Each hand is random. Past performance doesn't predict future results. The house edge is mathematical certainty. But sitting here with Linda's desperate hopes staring at me, with $8,000 in chips that had materialized from perfect timing and perfect strategy, the words felt different. The shoe's been running rich in face cards, I heard myself saying. That's good for the player. Kevin shot me a look. Dealers weren't supposed to give playing advice, especially not to customers who looked like they were betting their last dollar. Linda smiled like I'd just given her the secret to the universe. I knew it. I had a feeling about today. She placed $100 in the betting circle. Kevin dealt the cards, 7 of clubs, 4 of diamonds for her. 6 of hearts showing for the house. Point 11 against a 6. Perfect double-down situation. Double down, I said quietly. Linda looked confused. What does that mean? You double your bet, take exactly 1 more card. With 11 against his 6, it's the right mathematical play. She placed another 100 next to her original bet. Kevin dealt her the 9 of spades. 20 total. He flipped his whole card, Queen of Hearts for 16, then drew the 10 of clubs. 26. Bust. Linda won $400 on one hand. Oh my God, she whispered. Staring at the chips Kevin pushed toward her. Oh my God, this really works. But it didn't work. Not the way she thought. I'd just watched her get lucky on one hand, and now she believed she'd discovered some kind of system. That's how it always started. One good result convincing someone that luck was skill, that mathematics were just suggestions. For the next 40 minutes, I watched Linda lose everything. The 400 she'd won, plus the 380 she'd brought, plus another 200 she withdrew from the casino ATM. She kept looking at me for guidance, kept asking if she should hit or stand, kept waiting for me to share whatever secret had made my chips multiply. But there was no secret. I'd gotten lucky. The cards had fallen my way for 90 minutes. And I'd convinced myself it was skill instead of variance. Linda left without saying goodbye, walking toward the exit with empty pockets and the same tired expression she'd arrived with. I stared at my chips, still over $8,000, and realized something that made my stomach turn. I wasn't any different from Linda. I'd just had a longer winning streak. By 8:30 a.m. The casino's most dedicated customers were settling in for what they probably called serious gambling. These weren't tourists or casual players. These were people with problems that ran deeper than money. The retired electrician took the seat Linda had vacated. Tommy Kowalski. I knew his name from 3 years of Tuesday morning conversations. He always arrived after his overnight security shift, always played until his pension check was gone, always left promising himself he'd quit. Morning, Jacob, he said, pulling out a roll of hundreds. Saw you hitting it pretty good earlier. Just lucky. Luck's got nothing to do with it. I've been watching you deal for 3 years. You know this game better than anyone. Tommy peeled off $500 and asked for green chips. Kevin pushed them across the felt with the same neutral expression I'd perfected over 4 years. No judgment, no warnings, just professional service. My granddaughter's turning 7 next week, Tommy said, placing 2 chips in the betting circle. Promised her one of those electric scooters. Pink one with sparkly streamers. I'd heard about Tommy's granddaughter before. Every Tuesday, he talked about buying her presents with his winnings. Every Tuesday, he lost his grocery money instead. The cards fell badly for Tommy from the start. 2 hours later, he was down $850, the scooter money, plus whatever else he'd scraped together from his pension check. I need to apply for a marker. He told Kevin that I'd processed hundreds of these applications as a dealer. The casino's credit department was efficient. They'd check Tommy's history, see 3 years of reliable losses, approve him for another $500. Kevin handed him the paperwork. Tommy signed without reading it, the way people do when they're desperate enough to borrow money from a casino. "This'll turn around," Tommy muttered, more to himself than to us. "It always does eventually." But it didn't turn around. It never did. The mathematics were too perfect, too patient. The house edge didn't care about granddaughters or promises or electric scooters with sparkly streamers. Tommy lost the marker money in 37 minutes. $500 that probably represented 2 weeks of his pension, gone in the time it takes to drive across town. When he finally stood up to leave, he looked older than when he'd sat down. That's what losing does. It ages you in real time, steals years along with dollars. "See you next Tuesday, Jacob." He said that I wanted to tell him not to come back. Wanted to explain that the mathematics would never work in his favor, that the scooter would never materialize, that his granddaughter would be better off with a grandfather who kept his pension instead of feeding it to a machine designed to take it. Instead, I nodded and said, "Take care, Tommy." After he left, I counted my chips again. Still over 8,000. Still more than enough to solve every problem Sarah and I had. But watching Tommy walk away with empty pockets reminded me of something I'd been trying to ignore. The house edge doesn't care if you're a dealer or a player, an expert or a beginner. Given enough time, it takes everyone's money that I'd been playing for 3 hours. The mathematics that had been working for me felt less reliable now, less predictable. Kevin shuffled the cards for a fresh shoe. The sound was familiar. I'd heard it thousands of times from the other side of the table. But this time, it sounded different. This time, it sounded like a warning. Danny Martinez appeared at table 12 during a lull, making his rounds like shift supervisors do. He nodded at Kevin, glanced at my chip stack, didn't seem surprised to see a dealer playing during off hours. "How's the game treating you, Winslow?" "Can't complain." I gestured to my chips. "Having a good morning." That's what I like to hear. You know, most dealers never play. They see too much from behind the table. Maybe that's why I'm winning. I know what not to do. Danny laughed. "Makes sense. Hey, speaking of knowing things, you're familiar with our employee policy on playing, right?" The question seemed casual, but Danny's questions were never casual. "What about it?" "Off-duty dealers can play anywhere except their own table, as long as you're not in uniform and not on shift." Some new dealer was asking about it yesterday. Seemed nervous. Nervous about what? Thought maybe it was against company policy. I told him as long as he followed the rules, management doesn't care. Hell, sometimes it's good for the other players to see that even the dealers think they can win. Danny's words hit me like cold water. Sometimes it's good for the other players to see that even the dealers think they can win. I wasn't just playing blackjack anymore. I was part of the casino's marketing strategy. The dealer who thought he could beat the system, sitting at a table where other players could see him winning, giving everyone else hope that maybe they could win too. "Just thought you should know," Danny continued. "In case anyone gives you grief about playing, you're not breaking any rules." After he walked away, I stared at my chips with different eyes. $8,300. More money than I'd ever had in my hands at one time. More than enough to save our house, our marriage, our future, but also bait. Proof that the system could be beaten, at least temporarily. Evidence that dealers weren't immune to the same mathematical forces that governed everyone else's losses. Kevin dealt the next hand without comment. I'd been playing for 3.5 hours, winning more than I'd dreamed possible. The smart move was to cash out, drive home, tell Sarah we were saved. Instead, I placed my largest bet yet, $500 in the betting circle. By 9 a.m., I had $13,400 in chips. More money than I'd earned in 6 months of dealing. More than enough to pay every bill, clear every debt, start fresh with Sarah. I could see myself walking through our front door with solutions instead of problems. Could imagine her face when I told her we were safe, we were saved, we could stop worrying about money for the first time in years. The mathematics were working. For years of watching other people lose had taught me how to win.my phone buzzed with a text message. Did you get the money for rent? Sarah's question arrived at the exact moment my winning streak was peaking. Perfect timing, perfect irony. Yes, I wanted to text back. Yes, I got the money. I got all the money. Instead, I placed my largest bet yet, $1,000 in the betting circle. Kevin dealt the cards, 7 of clubs, 4 of hearts. 11 total. He showed a 6. Perfect double-down situation. I placed another 1,000 next to my original bet. Kevin dealt the third card, 10 of spades. 21 total. He flipped his whole card, Queen of hearts. 16. Drew a 5 of diamonds. 21 for the house. Push.my first non-winning hand in over an hour. The mathematics were finally asserting themselves, but I still had $13,000. Still more than enough to solve everything. The question was whether I was smart enough to walk away with it. The fresh shoe changed everything. What had felt like mathematical destiny became mathematical reality. The house edge reasserted itself with brutal efficiency. My $13,400 became $12,000 on the first hand, $11,500 on the second. The cards that had been falling perfectly for 3 hours suddenly turned indifferent. Then hostile. Kevin dealt with the same neutral expression he'd maintained all morning, but I could see something in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or sympathy. He'd dealt to enough players to know how these sessions ended. The businessman from Denver stopped taking notes. The old-timer stopped following my bets. One by one, the players who'd gathered to watch my winning streak drifted away, understanding that the show was over, but I couldn't accept that. Not after 3 hours of proving that the game could be beaten, that expertise could overcome mathematics, that I was different from every other player who'd ever lost their rent money at these tables. I increased my bets, chasing the feeling that had carried me to 13,000. 500 per hand became 700, then 1,000. The mathematics I'd relied on for 3 hours were failing me, but maybe they just needed more leverage. Easy, Jacob, Kevin said quietly after I'd lost 4 straight hands. Maybe take a break. But I couldn't take a break. Sarah's text was still glowing on my phone screen. Did you get the money for rent? She was depending on me to solve this, to be the husband who fixed problems instead of creating them. 11,000 became 9,500, then 8,000. The eviction notice in my pocket felt heavier with each losing hand. At 9:15 a.m., I was down to $6,400. Still more than enough for rent, but the trajectory was clear. The house edge that had been dormant for 3 hours was making up for lost time. Every dealer learns about variance during training. Cards fall randomly, but random doesn't mean evenly distributed. You can flip a coin 10 times and get 8 heads, but over 1,000 flips, the results will approach 50-50. I'd experienced the 8 heads part. Now I was living through the correction. My phone buzzed again. Sarah calling from the hospital. I let it go to voicemail, too focused on the cards to explain what was happening. How could I tell her that I'd taken our last $1,800 and turned it into 13,000, only to watch it disappear again? 6,400 became 5,800, then 5,200. Each loss felt personal, like the cards were punishing me for believing I could be different. The businessman from Denver shook his head and walked away. House always wins, he muttered, but the house hadn't won yet. I still had enough money to pay our rent, to solve the immediate crisis. All I needed was to stop, to gather my remaining chips, cash out, drive home with a solution instead of a new problem. Instead, I placed another $1,000 bet in the betting circle. Kevin dealt the cards, 5 of diamonds, 6 of clubs. 11 total. He showed a king. I hit and drew a queen. 21. Kevin flipped his whole card, ace of hearts. 21 for the house. Push. No winner, no loser, but I was losing anyway. Losing to time, to mathematics, to the inevitable correction that follows every hot streak. 9:45 a.m. I had $3,800 left. Still more than enough for rent. But the momentum was against me now. I should have quit. I should have walked away with a profit. Instead, I kept playing, convinced that the cards would remember how generous they'd been, that the mathematics would return to my favor. They didn't. At 9:18 a.m., I pushed my final $300 across the felt. Everything else was gone. The 13,000 I'd won, the 1,800 I'd brought, the hope that had carried me through the longest night of my life. Kevin dealt the cards without expression, maintaining the professional neutrality I'd perfected over 4 years. He understood what was happening because he'd seen it thousands of times. The hot streak that turns cold, the winner who becomes a loser, the player who can't walk away. Point 7 of diamonds, 4 of clubs. 11 total. Kevin showed a 6-dot perfect double-down situation. Basic strategy demanded that I double my bet and take exactly one more card. But I didn't have another $300. I'd lost everything else to the mathematics I'd thought I could beat that I hit instead and drew a 10 of hearts. 21 total. Kevin flipped his whole card. King of spades. 16. He drew a queen of diamonds. 26. Bust. I won my last hand. The only hand that mattered and the only hand that didn't matter at all. Kevin pushed $600 across the felt. My 300 returned plus 300 in winnings. $600 from the 1,800 I'd started with. Enough to buy groceries for a couple weeks, but nowhere near enough to save our house. Good luck, Kevin said as I gathered my chips. I walked to the cage and cashed out, trading the green and red chips for 6 crisp $100 bills. The cashier counted them twice, standard procedure, then slid them through the window. Have a nice day, sir. The parking lot was fully lit now, morning sun burning away the dawn that had made everything seem possible 4 hours earlier. I sat in my Honda Civic, staring at the 6 bills in my hands. Sarah would be waking up soon, getting ready for another shift at the hospital. She'd check her phone for messages, maybe call to see if I'd found a solution to our crisis. I had $600 instead of $3,200. I had lies instead of explanations. I had a marriage that was about to collapse under the weight of my failures. The drive home took 23 minutes, long enough to rehearse a dozen different explanations, none of them good enough to bridge the gap between what Sarah needed and what I could provide. She was sitting at our kitchen table when I walked through the door, still in her scrubs from the night shift, but wide awake. A cup of coffee in her hands, divorce papers spread across the surface in front of her. I know, she said before I could speak. I called the casino. They told me you'd been playing at table 12 all morning. I stood in our doorway, $600 in my pocket, watching 4 years of marriage dissolve into paperwork. Sarah, I can explain. No. She slid the papers across the table. I can't watch you disappear anymore, Jacob. I won't. The eviction notice was still in my back pocket, but it didn't matter now. We were losing more than our house. We were losing each other. I thought I could fix this, I said. You can't fix anything by breaking everything else. She was right. She'd been right all along. But understanding that didn't change the mathematics of our situation. $600 against $3,200 in debt. Divorce papers against marriage vows. The house edge against everything I'd thought I knew about beating impossible odds. That I signed the papers 3 days later, sitting in a lawyer's office with hands that still trembled whenever I heard the sound of shuffling cards. 3 days after signing the divorce papers, I moved into a motel room on Highway 54, 23 miles from everything I used to call home. The Sunset Inn charged $240 a week, cash only, no questions asked. The kind of place that catered to people whose lives had taken unexpected turns. Room 127 smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and decades of other people's mistakes. 2 double beds with scratchy comforters, a television that got 6 channels clearly, and a window that looked out on the motel's parking lot and the highway beyond. I'd brought 3 suitcases and a cardboard box, everything I owned that hadn't been sold, pawned, or left behind in the house that was no longer mine. The eviction had happened on a Tuesday, exactly as the notice had promised. I'd loaded my Honda Civic while Sarah stayed at her sister's place across town, unable to watch the final act of our collapse. The sheriff's deputy was polite but firm. I had until 6 p.m. to remove my belongings. Then the locks would be changed. I'd driven past the Riverside Casino on my way to the motel. Saw the neon sign reflecting in my rearview mirror as I pulled onto the highway. The building looked smaller from this distance, less significant. Just another business extracting money from people who couldn't afford to lose it.